Okay, so you want to open a grocery store. You find a space, you stock the shelves, and you watch the money roll in. Thousands of people walking through your doors every single week, carts loaded up, cash registers ringing from the moment you open to the moment you lock up. It sounds like one of the safest bets in business. People always need food. Recessions come and go, but grocery stores? They never close. So you figure if you can just get a store up and running, you're basically printing money. Here's the thing. The average American supermarket does about $34 million in sales every single year. Some of the big ones push 50, 60, even 100 million. And yet, the people who own these stores are not automatically rich. Most of them are not rich at all. Some of them are barely surviving. And the ones who are doing well not because they're selling a lot of groceries, but because they've turned the entire business into a machine so precise, so calibrated, that it can survive on margins most people would laugh at. So today we're going to take that machine apart, piece by piece. We're going to follow the money from the moment a customer hands over $100 at the register, all the way down to the last dollar the owner actually keeps. And by the end of this, you're going to look at your local grocery store completely differently. Let's start with the most important number in this entire business. Not revenue, not profit. The gross margin. A grocery store buys products from suppliers at wholesale prices and sells them to you at retail prices. The difference between those two prices, before anything else gets paid, is the gross margin. And in the grocery business, that number is brutally small. The average grocery store operates on a gross margin of somewhere between 22 and 28 cents on every dollar of sales. That means if the store brings in $100 from a customer, roughly 72 to 78 of those dollars went straight back out the door to pay for the products themselves. The store only gets to keep about $26 to pay for everything else: the rent, the staff, the electricity, the insurance, and yes, eventually, the owner's income. Now compare that to something like a software company, which might keep 70 or 80 cents of every dollar as gross profit, or a luxury goods brand, which can keep even more. Grocery stores are competing on razor-thin margins because the products they sell, milk, bread, eggs, canned beans, are things that consumers know the price of. You've bought milk 100 times. You know what it costs. So stores can't just charge whatever they want. The market sets the price, and the grocery store has to work within it. This is the central reality of the entire business. You are not in a high-margin game. You are in a high-volume, low-margin game, and the rules of survival are completely different. Now let's actually follow $100 through a grocery store and see where it goes. A customer walks up to the register and pays $100 for their weekly shop. Of that $100, about $72 to $75 immediately goes toward paying for the products that were just sold. That's the cost of goods. You've got $25 to $28 left. That's your gross profit. But you're not done paying bills yet. Not even close. Out of that $25 to $28, you need to pay your staff. Payroll in a grocery store, wages, benefits, payroll taxes, runs somewhere between 12 and 16% of total sales. On our $100 basket, that's $12 to $16 gone. Now you're down to about $12. Then comes the rent or mortgage on the building. Commercial real estate for grocery stores typically runs between 3 and 5% of sales. So another $3 to $5 gone. You're sitting at around $7 to $9. Then utilities, electricity, gas, water, refrigeration, another 1.5 to 2%. That's another $1.50 to $2. Down to $5 to $7. Payment processing fees on credit and debit cards, which now account for the majority of transactions, take another 1.5 to 2%. Another $1.50 to $2. Now you're at $3 to $5. Insurance, maintenance on equipment, administrative costs, marketing, that's another 1 to 2%. You're now looking at somewhere between $1 and $3 of actual operating profit on every $100 you sold. The grocery industry historically averages a net profit margin of between 1.5 and 2.5%. That means the owner keeps at most $2.50 from every $100 that flows through the register on a good day, with everything going right. Now, here's where it gets interesting, because not every product on those shelves makes the same margin. Walk into any grocery store, and what you're actually looking at is a collection of completely different businesses operating under one roof, each with its own economics. This is one of the things most people never realize, and it's one of the things that separates profitable stores from ones that struggle. The deli counter, the bakery, the prepared foods section, that's where the real money is. Margins in these departments can run between 45 and 55%. When a store makes a rotisserie chicken or bakes a loaf of sourdough, they're adding labor and skill to raw ingredients. That labor costs money, but the product they're selling is worth far more than the sum of its parts. Customers pay a premium for convenience, for something they didn't have to make themselves. And the store captures that premium. Fresh produce is another strong performer. Margins on fruits and vegetables typically run between 30 and 38%. Not as high as prepared foods, but strong. The problem with produce is that it spoils, and spoilage is money that the store already spent and can never get back. So produce is a high-margin, high-risk category. Meat and seafood run margins somewhere between 25 and 33%. Again, skilled labor is involved, the butchers, the prep work, and customers are willing to pay for quality cuts. Then you get to dairy and the economic shift. Milk, cheese, butter, these are items consumers buy every week and know the exact price of. Margins drop to somewhere between 20 and 25%. Not terrible, but far from exciting. The real value of dairy is that it makes people come to the store consistently. And then there's the dry goods aisle. Packaged cereals, canned vegetables, pasta, cooking oil. These are the most commoditized products in the store. Consumers can check prices on their phones. They can buy the same exact box of cereal at 6 different stores. So margins on dry packaged goods collapse to somewhere between 15 and 22%. High volume, low margin, and essential for keeping overall basket sizes up. The strategic game for a smart grocery operator is getting the right mix of all of these. You need the low-margin staples to drive traffic, but you need to maximize the time customers spend near your high-margin sections. This is why every grocery store puts the dairy at the back. You have to walk past the bakery, the deli, the specialty cheeses, and the prepared meals to get to the milk you came in for. That walk is engineered, every inch of it, which brings us to one of the most fascinating strategies in all of retail, the loss leader. A loss leader is a product that a store deliberately prices so low that it barely breaks even, or actually loses money on every unit sold. Eggs, milk, rotisserie chickens, and bananas are classic examples. Kroger has famously sold rotisserie chickens for $4.99 for years, well below what it costs to produce and sell them. In 2023, Kroger's own executives acknowledged in public filings that the chicken program was subsidized by the rest of the store. So why do it? Because the person who walks in for a $4.99 chicken doesn't just buy the chicken. They spend, on average, somewhere between $60 and $90 more in the same visit. The chicken is not a product. The chicken is a customer acquisition tool. The store loses money on the chicken and makes it back, and then some, on everything else in the basket. This is how you have to think about grocery store economics. Nothing exists in isolation. Every pricing decision affects the entire store, the entire basket, the entire customer relationship. If you're finding this breakdown valuable, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and give the video a like. It genuinely helps this channel keep making content like this. Now let's talk about something that doesn't get nearly enough attention: shrinkage. Shrinkage is the industry term for all the ways inventory disappears without generating a sale. And in grocery retail, it is one of the most dangerous threats to profitability there is. The biggest component of shrinkage is not shoplifting, even though shoplifting gets most of the media attention. The biggest component is food spoilage and waste. Products that expire before they're sold, produce that goes soft, bread that goes stale, meat that reaches its sell-by date. These products were purchased from a supplier. The store paid for them, and now they're going in the trash. That money is gone. The second component is theft, both external shoplifting and internal employee theft. The third component is administrative errors, wrong inventory counts, pricing mistakes, products damaged in handling. And the fourth is supplier fraud, short deliveries, incorrect billing. Combined, shrinkage costs the average grocery store about 3.5% of total sales per year. That might not sound like much, but remember, the store's total net profit is only about 2% of sales. So shrinkage is consuming more than the entire profit margin. And the store is only surviving because it manages to recoup most of that through operational efficiency. If shrinkage gets out of control and climbs to 5 or 6%, which can happen with a broken refrigeration unit or a poorly managed produce section, the store is operating at a loss. Full stop. Here's a number that makes this concrete. If a grocery store runs at a 2% net margin and loses a single $12 block of cheese to spoilage, the store has to sell an additional $600 worth of groceries just to recover the profit that one block of cheese represented. That's the math. Every item that spoils, every item that walks out the door in a shoplifter's bag, requires hundreds of dollars of additional sales to neutralize antifreeze management in a grocery store is therefore not a back-office function. It is a critical profit generation mechanism. Stores that are good at it, that forecast demand accurately, that rotate stock precisely, that maintain cold chain integrity, are measurably more profitable than stores that are sloppy about it. The difference isn't just a few percentage points. It can be the difference between a viable business and a failing one. Now let's talk about real estate, because where a grocery store sits is almost as important as what it sells. A grocery store needs a lot of space. The national average size for a traditional supermarket in the United States is about 42,000 square feet. That's a big footprint, and big footprints cost serious money. Commercial lease rates for grocery-anchored retail space vary enormously by location, but in a suburban market you might be looking at $15 to $25 per square foot per year. In a dense urban market, that number can climb to $50, $60, or even $80 per square foot. On a 42,000 square foot store, the rent bill alone can run anywhere from $600,000 a year to well over $3 million. But here's the trap. The cheap location is not automatically the good deal. A store in a low-traffic area with cheap rent might see half the daily customer volume of a store in a busy neighborhood. Half the customers means half the sales. And with fixed costs like payroll, utilities, and insurance that don't scale down proportionally with sales volume, the cheap rent store can actually be far less profitable than the expensive rent store. The metric the industry uses to evaluate real estate efficiency is sales per square foot. In the US grocery sector, the benchmark for a healthy, well-run store is somewhere between $300 and $500 in annual sales per square foot of selling area. The top performers, Trader Joe's is a famous example, reportedly achieve over $1,000 per square foot, which is extraordinary. They achieve it through extremely tight product selection, small store footprints, and high inventory turnover. Costco achieves high sales per square foot through enormous volume on a limited number of products. A store that drops below $200 per square foot in annual sales is in trouble. Its fixed occupancy costs are eating too large a share of its revenue, and no amount of efficiency on the floor can fully compensate. Now let's talk about people, because labor is the second largest cost in this business after the products themselves. A mid-sized grocery store employs somewhere between 100 and 200 people when you count full-time and part-time staff combined. You need cashiers, baggers, stockers who come in overnight to replenish shelves, department managers for produce, meat, deli, and bakery, skilled tradespeople like butchers who command higher wages, maintenance staff, and administrative and management staff. All of these people need to be scheduled across 7 days a week, typically from 6 in the morning to midnight or beyond. Total labor costs, wages, benefits, employer-side payroll taxes, typically run between 12 and 16% of sales in a grocery store. For a store doing $10 million a year in sales, that's somewhere between $1.2 million and $1.6 million going to payroll annually. The scheduling problem is genuinely difficult. A store needs far more staff on a Saturday afternoon than on a Tuesday morning. Overstaffing on Tuesday burns labor costs with nothing to show for it. Understaffing on Saturday means long checkout lines, empty shelves, and customers who don't come back. The checkout line problem is its own economic puzzle. Every open lane requires a cashier. Every idle cashier with no customers is a cost with no revenue to offset it. So stores shifted toward self-checkout machines, which can process customers without ongoing hourly wages. But self-checkout comes with a trade-off: higher shrinkage rates as customers skip scanning items, and lower satisfaction scores. The labor savings partially come at the expense of revenue integrity and customer loyalty. The right balance is something every major chain is still actively working out. Now let's get into something that almost no one outside the industry understands: how cash flows through a grocery business, and why it's different from almost every other type of business. Imagine you're a software company. You sell a subscription. The customer pays you, and you don't have to buy anything to fulfill that subscription. The product already exists and can be copied infinitely. Your cash situation is simple. In a grocery store, you have to buy every product before you can sell it. You're constantly spending cash to acquire inventory, and then hoping to convert that inventory back into cash at a markup before it spoils. This creates a very specific kind of cash flow pressure. Here's where it gets fascinating. Grocery stores have a structural advantage that very few people recognize. When a customer buys groceries, they pay immediately, cash, card, instantly settled. But when the grocery store buys products from a supplier, they typically don't have to pay immediately. Large grocery chains can negotiate payment terms with suppliers that give them 30, 60, or even 90 days to pay. This means the store sells the milk on Monday, collects the customer's money on Monday, but doesn't have to pay the dairy for that milk until 60 days later. In accounting terms, this creates a negative cash conversion cycle. The store is collecting money from customers faster than it's paying suppliers. It's effectively using its suppliers as an interest-free source of working capital. This structural phenomenon is one of the reasons that well-run grocery chains can fund expansion and renovations without relying heavily on bank debt. They're floating on their suppliers' money. Walmart, which operates one of the largest grocery businesses in the world, has famously leveraged this dynamic for decades. Its accounts payable, money it owes suppliers but hasn't paid yet, runs into the tens of billions of dollars at any given time. This advantage, however, is almost entirely reserved for large chains with the negotiating leverage to demand extended payment terms. A small independent grocery store typically has far less leverage with suppliers. They may have to pay on delivery or within 7 to 14 days, and that changes the cash flow picture dramatically. Which brings us to the structural disadvantage of the independent grocery store, and it's significant. When a regional chain like Publix or a national player like Kroger buys products from a supplier, they're buying in volumes that no single independent can match. They might be buying 1 million units of a particular brand of soup across their network. That volume gives them negotiating power. They can demand lower per unit wholesale prices. They can demand slotting fees, payments from the brand to guarantee shelf space, which can run into tens of thousands of dollars per product for a new national listing. They can demand promotional subsidies, volume rebates, and extended payment terms. An independent grocery store buying 2,000 units of that same soup has essentially no leverage. They pay closer to the list wholesale price. They receive fewer promotional subsidies. They often pay sooner. The net result is that the independent pays more for the same products, sells them at prices that have to remain competitive with the chain store down the street, and captures a smaller margin on every sale. The independents that survive, and many do, survive by doing something the chains can't easily do. They go deep into a specific niche. They stock local and artisanal products that aren't available in chain stores. They know their customers personally. They curate their selection for a specific neighborhood demographic rather than trying to be everything to everyone. They compete on experience and product specificity rather than on price, but many don't make it. The US has seen a steady decline in independent grocery operators over the past several decades, a trend driven precisely by the scale advantages that large chains continue to compound. Let's bring all of this together into a real number picture. Imagine a grocery store generating $10 million in annual sales. That sounds like a substantial business. Here's what the income statement looks like. Revenue is $10 million. Cost of goods sold, what the store paid wholesale for everything it sold, comes out at about $7,200,000. That leaves gross profit of $2,800,000. Now come the operating expenses. Payroll and benefits, about $1,400,000. Rent and occupancy costs, $450,000. Shrinkage, spoilage, and waste, $350,000. Utilities and facility maintenance, $200,000. Payment processing and administrative costs, $150,000. Marketing and miscellaneous expenses, $50,000. Add all of that up and total operating expenses come to $2,600,000. That leaves operating profit of $200,000 on $10 million in revenue. That's a 2% operating margin. $200,000 is reasonable income for a hard-working small business owner. But it comes with an enormous amount of complexity, risk, and capital at stake. And it requires nearly everything going right. A refrigeration failure that spoils a significant amount of perishable inventory. A week of reduced traffic due to road construction outside. A minimum wage increase in the state that adds another $50,000 to annual payroll costs. A new competitor opening 2 miles away. Any one of these can cut that $200,000 profit dramatically, or eliminate it entirely. So how do the people in this industry actually build wealth? Because some of them clearly do. The answer is usually one of 3 things. Scale, real estate ownership, or private label. Scale means multiple locations. A 2% net margin on one store generating $200,000 in profit is modest. A 2% net margin across 30 stores generating $6 million in profit is a real business. Each additional store doesn't just add revenue linearly. It adds negotiating leverage with suppliers, spreads fixed costs like management and technology infrastructure across a larger base, and enables the kind of sophisticated inventory management systems that improve margins across the network. Regional chains like Stater Brothers, which operates in Southern California, and chains like Winco Foods in the Pacific Northwest have built durable, profitable businesses exactly this way. Real estate ownership is the second path. If a grocery operator owns the building rather than leasing it, the property appreciates over time while the operating business depreciates. The building becomes a separate asset that generates value independently of whether the grocery business has a good year or a bad year. Many successful independent grocery families over multiple generations built their wealth this way, not from grocery profits alone, but from the real estate underneath the store. Private label is the third lever, and it's the one the biggest chains have invested most aggressively. When Kroger sells you its Simple Truth brand of organic canned tomatoes instead of a national brand, it's capturing the margin that would otherwise have gone to the brand's manufacturer. Private label gross margins can run 10 to 15 percentage points higher than equivalent national brand products. Kroger's private label penetration is now around 30% of total sales. Costco's Kirkland Signature brand accounts for a similar proportion. These numbers directly drive the superior profitability of these businesses compared to chains with weaker private label programs. Now let's talk about what happens when things go wrong, because the downside in this business is severe. Grocery stores have extremely high fixed costs. The rent doesn't go down if sales are slow. The refrigeration electricity doesn't cost less in January than in July. The minimum staffing levels required to keep a store functional don't shrink proportionally just because foot traffic drops. This creates a specific kind of financial danger called operating leverage. When sales are strong, every dollar above your break-even point flows very efficiently to the bottom line. But when sales fall, the fixed cost base doesn't fall with them. A 10% drop in revenue at a store operating on a 2% net margin can easily push that store into negative territory, not a smaller profit. An actual loss. This happened visibly across the industry during periods of aggressive discounting by Aldi and Lidl, the German discount chains that have expanded significantly across the eastern United States over the past decade. When one of these discounters opens near an established supermarket, the established store can see 5 to 10% revenue erosion almost immediately, particularly in the high-volume dry goods categories where the discounters are most competitive. For a store already operating near the margin, that revenue erosion can tip the business from barely profitable to loss-making. The Great Atlantic and Pacific Tea Company, most Americans knew it as A&P, was the largest grocery chain in the United States for most of the 20th century. At its peak, it had nearly 16,000 locations. It filed for bankruptcy in 2010 and again in 2015, ultimately liquidating entirely. The causes were multiple: too much debt, outdated stores, a failure to respond to competition, but the underlying fragility was the same thin margin structure that makes every grocery operator vulnerable when conditions shift. If you want to go deeper on running a business like this, the full financial model, the operational playbook, the metrics that actually matter, check out the detailed business guide linked in the description and pinned in the first comment. The question you're probably sitting with now is, would you actually want to own one of these? Here's the honest answer. The best case scenario for a well-run, single-location grocery store doing $10 million in revenue is somewhere between $150,000 and $250,000 in annual operating profit. That's a living. For the right owner-operator who wants to be deeply embedded in a community, who takes genuine pride in the quality of their produce and the relationships with their customers, who is willing to work long hours and manage extraordinary complexity. It can be a deeply satisfying business. The realistic scenario for an average operator in a moderately competitive market is tighter than that. Higher shrinkage, less negotiating leverage with suppliers, more price competition from nearby chains. The profit might be closer to $50,000 to $100,000 a year, which is very thin reward for the capital invested in the complexity managed. And the bad scenario, a new competitor, a regulatory change, a spike in minimum wage, a refrigeration catastrophe, can turn a modestly profitable store into a money-losing operation within a single fiscal year. The grocery business doesn't reward operators who are good at selling groceries. It rewards operators who are obsessive about the numbers, about inventory turnover, about shrinkage rates, about labor scheduling, about supplier negotiations, about real estate economics. The stores that thrive are the ones where the owner knows at any given moment exactly what their gross margin was last Tuesday versus the Tuesday before, and exactly which department drove the difference. So here's the question to sit with. Behind every full shopping cart, every weekly shop, every routine grocery run is a machine of extraordinary complexity, one that requires perfect coordination of purchasing, logistics, real estate, labor, technology, and cash flow just to generate 2 cents of profit on every dollar sold. The stores that make it look effortless have spent years building systems precise enough to extract profit from volume that would be invisible in almost any other industry. Would you rather own that machine or simply be the one who benefits from it every week? If you enjoyed this video, please like it and subscribe if you haven't already, and share it with someone who thinks running a grocery store sounds like an easy business. Thanks for watching.